At the beginning of humanity, when the world was still young and the earth had just been marked by the fall of Eden, the story of Cain, the first son of Adam and Eve, was born. He was not only the firstborn of the human race, but also the bearer of the first great conflict between brothers, marked by jealousy, tragedy, and eternal consequences. When looking at Cain and the events that shaped his life, we are led to reflect on the constant struggle between our impulses and choices, on how we face the marks we carry and the stories we leave behind. This is a story of humanity, imperfection, and above all, a legacy that continues to intrigue us to this day. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting biblical stories and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the content, don't forget to send a thanks a lot. And if you want to support the channel even more, become a member and gain access to exclusive benefits. Adam and Eve had experienced the Garden of Eden in all its perfection. Every step in the garden was a reminder of the communion they had with God, until, with the fall, they were expelled and thrown into a world marked by hard work, pain, and uncertainty. It was in this scenario of arid land and uncertain future that Eve gave birth to her firstborn. Cain's birth was a moment that brought a mix of hope and mystery. She looked at the little being in her arms and declared proudly, "With the Lord's help, I had a man." These words carried the expectation of redemption, perhaps even the promise of something great. After all, God had promised that the woman's seed would trample the serpent's head. Could Cain be the beginning of this restoration? Cain grew up watching his parents work hard, plowing the land that insisted on resisting each seed planted. It was the direct result of the curse, and he, the first son of humanity, was inserted into this new order. There was no luxury, no easy rest. Everything was achieved with effort, sweat, and sometimes tears. He became a reflection of this difficult environment, developing a resilient personality, but also full of shadows that were beginning to form in his heart. As he matured, Cain began to take on responsibilities. He dedicated himself to agriculture, learning how to work with the land and earn a living from it for his family. However, in such a new world and still without clear answers to many things, there were always questions in the air. What would life be like beyond that small family nucleus? Would there be other people? Had God created others, as he had created Adam and Eve? These questions, even unspoken, hovered in each interaction. Then came Abel, the second son, and with him a new dynamic. Abel became a shepherd, while Cain remained in the land. The two brothers followed their separate routines, but there was something inevitable about their destiny, something that seemed to grow silently between them, like the weeds that Cain knew so well. The unfolding of their lives was just beginning, and a choice made soon would change the course of their stories forever. Cain and Abel grew up in a world still in formation, surrounded by the unknown and their parents' memories of Eden, a place they themselves would never know. While Cain worked the land with effort, cultivating fruits and cereals, Abel ventured through the fields with the flock he guarded. They were different not only in their occupations, but also in the way they saw what they did. Cain saw work as a daily struggle against an ungrateful land, a reflection of the curse that weighed on them all. Abel, on the other hand, seemed to find a certain peace in tending sheep, a job that required patience but offered moments of contemplation. The brothers, so close in blood ties, also had differences that at some point would become evident, and that moment arrived when they both decided to present their offerings to the Lord. The land and livestock had prospered, and now it was time to thank God for his blessings. Cain brought part of the fruit of his hard work, what the land had given him, while Abel carefully separated the best of his sheep, those without blemish, as a sign of respect and devotion. The altar was erected, the fire lit, and everyone placed their offering. But when the two brothers waited for the divine answer, something unexpected happened. God gladly accepted Abel's sacrifice, but rejected Cain's. It wasn't a silent rejection. It was an act that Cain felt in his soul, a blow that wounded him deeply. He looked at his brother, trying to understand what was so different between them, but all he could feel was a growing heat in his chest, something that seemed to burn and wouldn't let up. God spoke to Cain, asking why he was so angry, warning him that sin was at the door, wanting to dominate him, but that he must resist. However, these words seemed to get lost in Cain's whirlwind of thoughts. Abel, in turn, continued to care for his sheep, oblivious to the storm that was forming in his brother's heart. The tension between the two grew every day, invisible but inescapable, until a dark decision would take shape in the field where they used to work together. The day started like any other, but something in Cain's eyes carried a weight that Abel couldn't ignore. His older brother asked him to go to the field, an invitation that at first glance did not arouse suspicion. It was common for the two of them to be there, taking care of their affairs, sharing stories, or resolving work issues. Abel, innocent, accepted the invitation and followed Cain to a remote place, where the silence was broken only by the rustling of the wind in the leaves and the sound of his own steps. As they walked, Cain's heart beat irregularly. The rejection of his offer, the look of approval that God had given Abel, all of that boiled in his mind. It was as if each step increased the pressure in his chest. When they finally stopped, Abel turned to Cain, perhaps to ask why they were there. But before he could say anything, Cain exploded. Words filled with pain, hurt and envy flowed like an uncontrolled river. He accused Abel, as if God's acceptance was his fault. Abel tried to argue, his voice calm in contrast to Cain's fury. He tried to calm him down, reminding him of the words God had said, that sin was at the door and that it was necessary to resist. But Abel's calm, which had so often made him a beloved brother, now seemed like fuel for the fire that consumed Cain. Without warning, anger took shape. With one blow, Cain took the life of his own brother. The world seemed to stop. Abel's body fell to the ground, and the silence that was once peaceful was now terrifying. Cain stood there, looking at what he had done, his hands covered in blood, his heart beating like a drum in despair. He tried to push away what he saw, as if closing his eyes could undo what was irreparable. But Abel's blood cried out from the earth, like a silent scream rising to the heavens. It was then that the voice of God called to him, "Cain, where is Abel, your brother?" The sound seemed to cut through the air, penetrating straight into Cain's consciousness. He tried to justify himself, to respond evasively, but he knew there was no way to hide what he had done. The silence that followed God's question seemed endless. Cain, still stunned, responded with a mixture of defiance and despair. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The rhetorical question echoed like a confession, but God knew everything. His voice, firm, declared, "Your brother's blood cries out to me from the earth." There was no escape for Cain. He had been confronted by the Creator, and his guilt could not be denied. God then pronounced the punishment, "Now you are cursed on the earth, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood. When you till the soil, it will no longer give you its strength. You will be a fugitive and a wanderer through the world." The sentence fell on Cain like a crushing stone. The land, which he had spent his life cultivating, would now refuse to bear fruit. He would be condemned to wander without a home, without roots. Terrified, Cain protested, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Today you cast me from the earth, and I will be hidden from your face. Anyone who finds me can kill me." Cain's fear was real. He knew that even though he was the firstborn of Adam and Eve, others could see him as an outcast and seek revenge. God's response, however, brought unexpected protection. He placed a mark on Cain, a mark that would identify and protect him so that no one would dare kill him. It was a mix of justice and mercy. Cain would live, but he would carry his guilt as an eternal burden. With the sentence, Cain departed east, heading for the land of Nod. There, far from his family, far from God's constant gaze, he began a new life. It was in this unknown land that he found his wife, a figure shrouded in mystery. Who was she? How did it come to exist there in a world that seemed so empty? The Bible doesn't answer directly, but his presence opened a new chapter in Cain's story. Together, he and his wife began their offspring. Cain's first son was named Enoch, and in honor of him, Cain built a city. In an attempt to defy the wandering fate imposed on him, he began to build a city. A bold act, considering his curse, was to roam the earth without rest. The city was named after Enoch, a tribute to his son. It was as if Cain was trying in some way to anchor his existence in the world, to take root in a soil that no longer bore fruit. The first city walls were simple, but carried symbolism. Each stone placed was an attempt to resist fate, to reconstruct the identity of someone who had been marked as an outcast. The city grew slowly, welcoming other wanderers, families who perhaps were also looking for a place where they could start over. Enoch became the center of this new world, and its foundation was a milestone for humanity. It was the first time that people came together in an organized space, seeking to create something lasting. Still, there was no escaping the past. The city was there, but it was impossible to ignore what had been done to get Cain to that point. The ground where the city was built seemed to hold an echo of Abel's blood, a constant reminder that, no matter how much he built, the foundation of everything was still marked by guilt. The city of Enoch prospered, and with it, the line of Cain began to leave its mark on the world. It wasn't long before the descendants of this guilt-ridden man became known not only for their survival, but also for their contributions and controversies. It was through them that many of the first human innovations emerged, as if the weight of carrying a history stained by Abel's blood pushed them to create, advance, and dominate. Among the names that emerged from this lineage, Lamech was one of the most notorious. Not only did he defy convention by introducing the practice of polygamy, marrying two women, Ada and Zillah, but he also brought out a dark side that seemed like an extension of Cain's legacy. In a moment that sealed his reputation, Lamech confessed to his wives that he had killed a man for hurting him. His statement was accompanied by a cold arrogance in which he compared himself to Cain, saying that if Cain would be avenged 7 times, he would be avenged 70 times 7. It was as if the echo of the original violence was now amplified, resonating on an even deeper level. Meanwhile, other descendants of Cain also distinguished themselves in completely different ways. Tubal-Cain, for example, became a master in the art of forging bronze and iron tools and weapons, initiating what could be called a technological revolution. He transformed the way people dealt with the world around them, bringing utility, but also creating instruments that could be used for destruction. His name, although less known than that of Lamech, symbolizes a turning point in the history of humanity, where innovation began to go hand in hand with power. Alongside Tubal-Cain, other names emerged, such as Jabal, who was a pioneer in living in tents and raising flocks, and Jubal, who brought music to the world, becoming the father of all who played the harp and flute. Even so, Cain's lineage carried an intriguing contrast. On the one hand, creation and innovation. On the other, the perpetuation of a shadow of violence and transgression that seemed impossible to dispel. Still, amidst the conquests and darkness, the mysterious figure of Cain's wife remained an enigma. Who was she? And what else could be hidden in her story? The presence of Cain's wife is one of the greatest mysteries hidden between the lines of the biblical narrative. The mention of it appears abruptly and without explanation, leaving questions that echo through the centuries. Who was this woman who accompanied him to the land of Nod? How did she get there? And more importantly, what was his role in the unfolding of this story marked by guilt, violence, and reinvention? Some say she was one of the daughters of Adam and Eve, a sister of Cain. At that time, when humanity was taking its first steps, this explanation seems natural, but it also raises doubts and discomforts. Others suggest that God could have created other lineages besides Adam and Eve, an idea that expands the possibilities, but which the biblical text neither confirms nor denies. Whoever she was, her presence was essential so that Cain's lineage would not become extinct, allowing him to leave a legacy. While the mystery of her origin remains, her presence highlights something even greater. What Cain began with her would grow into a legacy that, although full of contradictions, shaped the world. As the years passed, Cain was forced to find a balance between carrying this curse and building something new. His descendants grew, his city prospered, but the mark was always there. How did the people around her react to her? Did they fear Cain? Did they see the brand as a type of authority, as if it were a representative of divine justice, or a walking warning about the danger of defying God? Either way, it shaped how he interacted with the world, and how the world interacted with him. Despite divine protection, Cain never completely escaped the weight of his curse. The land, which he had worked so hard and depended on, continued to resist. Every seed planted was a battle, every harvest a reminder of his sentence. Still, he persevered. Maybe it was the human instinct to survive, to find purpose even in the midst of chaos. Or maybe it was something more. Cain seemed to be trapped in a cycle of creating and rebuilding, as if he was desperately trying to find a redemption that would never come. Cain's days turned into years, and the years into decades. He grew old under the weight of a life marked by guilt and struggle. The city he had founded, Enoch, flourished. Their descendants expanded their skills, innovated and created, but there was always a shadow that hung over their achievements. This shadow was the constant presence of Cain, whose story, even though not spoken aloud, was known to everyone. He was the marked man, the first to spill human blood, the wanderer who had defied his own curse by putting down roots. Cain's end is not recorded. There is no mention of how his life ended, whether it was naturally or abruptly. However, the silence about his final fate speaks louder than words could say. The legacy he left was ambiguous, a mixture of advances and conflicts. Their descendants, who introduced music, metallurgy, and other innovations, also perpetuated violence and pride. Cain may have been the first to commit murder, but somehow his story repeated itself in different tones throughout the generations. The arrogance of Lamech, who boasted of his violent deeds, seemed to echo the same fury that had once dominated Cain in the field with Abel. And while the city prospered, his wife's silent figure remained an unknown. Who she was, what she thought, and how she lived alongside such a tormented man are questions that remain unanswered. However, his presence was essential so that Cain's story did not end at the moment Abel fell. Together they formed a new line, a line that would carry both the weight of transgression and the strength of a new beginning. The story of Cain and his mysterious wife remains an enigma that spans the ages. It is not only the narrative of a man who fell into the abyss of jealousy and guilt, but also of someone who tried, in his own way, to resist the weight of a curse that seemed overwhelming. The mark that God placed on him was not just a protection against others, but a reminder that even the greatest sins do not escape the divine gaze. His wife, a figure shrouded in silence, represents the invisible role of those who sustain, even in the midst of chaos, helping to build where everything seemed lost. From Cain, we learn about the inevitable consequences of our choices, but also about the complexity of divine mercy, which allows new beginnings even in the darkest places. His story is a reflection of humanity, full of mistakes, impulses, and the search for meaning. With his wife, the story reminds us that no one builds alone. She, although silent, was essential for him to leave something beyond destruction. Thus, what Cain began as a transgression ended as a contradictory but deeply human legacy. A reminder that, in the end, our brands tell stories, both of pain and of possibilities for redemption. If you like the story of Cain and his mysterious wife and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming, be sure to like this video and share it with those you love. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, let's explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.